I love music. I love music docs, and really tell the story about Old Dirty Bastard, A Son Unique, Russell Jones was a dream come true.
Negotiating how to deal with the family. At the same time, she wanted to try to tell a well-rounded, complicated story.
We just wanted to get to the heart of Dirty was off stage. As a dad, what was he like as a husband? What did he teach them?
Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. And today we actually have Sam Pollard, who is one of our instructors who've done a course. So you can also check that out at filmmakeru.com. Every week we interview a film professional to discuss their work. And this week we're joined by, of course, Sam Pollard and his son, Jason Pollard, who both directed and edited the Old Dirty Bastard, A Tale of Two Dirties for A&E. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Gordon.
I guess my first question for you is, how did you guys become interested in doing this doc and get involved?
This company out of London called Pulse Films had reached out to me. I've been doing some work with them trying to develop some other projects, but then they came back to me and said, a couple of years ago, and said they were looking to do a documentary with A&E about Old Dirty Bastard from Wu-Tang. And I said to these guys, fellas, look at me, man, I'm too old. This is not my bailiwick. But I know just the right young person to do it, who's part of that whole music thing and knows that music extremely inside and out. I said, you should hire my son, Jason Pollard. And they reached out to Jason and they came with this idea that we would co-direct, and Jason was ecstatic. So I'll turn it over to Jason.
Yeah, as my dad said, when they approached them, and then when he approached me, you know, as a big 90s hip hop fan, as a big Wu-Tang fan, as a big Old Dirty Bastard fan, it seemed like the perfect project. You know, I love music. I love music docs. And, you know, the chance to explore and really tell the story about Old Dirty Bastard, you know, A Son Unique, Russell Jones was a dream come true. So I just jumped at the opportunity when it was presented to me.
Now, I do have to point out, because Sam, you said it wasn't your wheelhouse in terms of music, but I did notice in the first, I'd say, quarter, there was some jazz needle drops. Did you sneak those in, or how did that happen?
That's Jason. I mean, I don't even, I've seen the film a couple of times. I don't know those jazz needle drops. What jazz needle drops in there, Jason?
I mean, we use some library stuff, some jazzier stuff. You know, look, my dad, you know, just being my dad, being my mentor, you know, being my guiding light, the influence, I can't help it. I got it, there's obviously a jazz influence in hip hop, along with, you know, many other samples. So when, you know, we talk about that earlier period, instead of going straight hip hop, you know, let's go with a different genre. Let's go a little bit jazzier, you know, and jazz has so many different permutations and just different moods and different themes. I always love playing around with it. And I've done it in other films too. Like I did a film with Sasha Jenkins about the LA riots. And there's this part where Malcolm X is talking about, you know, a brother who was assaulted in LA. And as he's talking to NOI, it's a jazz play, you know, it's a jazz riff playing. You know, my dad did a fantastic sequence to, you know, a track and Four Little Girls that always inspires me. So that's why it's in there.
I grew up in a household in the projects in East Harlem. There's a program at WNET, the public television station, to get more people of color behind the camera, in the editing room, doing sound, writing scripts. When they put me in a dark room and they showed me how to use the splicer and the rewinds, I felt this big sigh of relief, this sense of, wow, I found my space. The editing part of filmmaking is the real nuts and bolts, what makes films come to life. You can ask Spielberg, you can ask Tarantino, you can ask Spike. When you sit here, this is where the proof is in the pudding. I'm Sam Pollard, and this is my class on documentary editing.
You've had a chance to, you know, watch your dad do all these amazing films as a director, as an editor, and what have you. And then here's your chance to do something on a topic that you're really interested in. And I'm wondering, what did you learn from your dad, or what ideas, what have you taken from or absorbed from him that you used in this?
I mean, the most important thing, it sounds really basic, but it's just to respect the process of doc filmmaking and filmmaking in general. And in that process, in being just rigid and disciplined in your process, that's where the creativity comes from. A lot of filmmakers just come in and they want to be super creative. I mean, we do too, but you have to realize it's preparation, you know, there's thought, there's, paper cuts, there's questions, all that stuff needs to be in place before the creativity even begins. And that's what I really learned from my dad, is that it's the process and it's the repetition of that process. And he always tells me, trust the process. You know how this goes when you're shooting, when you're cutting, and just keep at it. And that's really the greatest lesson. And to me, really everything unfolds out of that. The emotion, the storytelling, everything comes after that because you're finding all that stuff throughout your filmmaking process.
One of the things that when I was doing research for this is that I guess Young Dirty Bastard and Nicole basically the family came to her, and that's sort of how it started. So I'm wondering, how, because when I see a lot of music docs, they don't involve the family or they don't involve certain So, once you found out you had this family, what were some of the things you want to ask them and sort of get out of them to help round out this doc?
I mean, I think we just want to get to the heart of just who, Dirty was off stage. What was he like as a dad? What was he like as a husband? What did he teach them? I mean, these are all things I've heard them say before, but they gave us new insight. What was it like, when he was in prison? And I mean, honestly, they came to us with a lot of stuff that they wanted to express. When I did the interview with Isoline, I asked her some questions, but she made sure that she got in her points too about the legacy of ODB, what he meant to her and the different stories. His oldest daughter did that as well. They were really communicative about what they wanted to get across about their dad. And of course, we have to respect their wishes. And, they were right. They were right, all the time about what they wanted to, relate about Old Dirty Bastard to the world.
One of the biggest challenges when you're making a documentary about a person like an Old Dirty Bastard or anyone who's a celebrity and who has family that's alive, one of the biggest challenges we all face as filmmakers is negotiating how to deal with the family, at the same time as you want to try to tell a well-rounded, complicated story. And it can be tough. I mean, it could be a tough road, when you're dealing with a family and the estate. I sent Jason an article. I sent an article
Oh yeah,
about
Prince.
Prince and
Right.
Ezra Edelman. I
That's right.
mean, Jason understands that after reading that article, how challenging it is to deal with in the state. And fortunately, from my perspective, Jason could probably speak to this even in a deeper way. This family, Isoline and Bar's son, they seem to be pretty supportive, even when you're dealing with the edges of ODB that's not so pretty, you know.
There was, I was telling somebody else, there was one moment that they asked that I removed from the cut. And, I was, even though it was tough for me to cut out, I did cut it out because you got to respect, it's like I said, it was their dad, their husband, etc. But yeah, we were lucky. I mean, based on that Prince article, I mean, that's when it gets bad, that's when it gets really bad. And there were challenges with making this film as well that had to do with the music and stuff like that. I mean, it's the music business and it gets messy. But I think my lucky star that the family was and the estate were on board for
Yeah.
the things we were trying to do.
Well, that was going to be my question because it's literally called A Tale of Two Dirties, and you're trying to show the different sides of them. So getting the family to be comfortable to talk about that. And that sort of, there's one area that I was really fascinated with, and that is when Jared shows up and you talk about trying to get an interview, or you show the little card saying trying to get an interview with him. And it was very frustrating because you could see him in there. I'm wondering, like, all the hangers on and the Jared sort of moment, what was there that we just couldn't get into the doc because he wouldn't talk?
It's a great question. I mean, this is what I'll say. Jared, I reached out by email. We exchanged phone numbers. Jared still texts me to this day. Jared is a very complex guy. I think we're around the same age. He might be a little bit younger. And what he relayed to me was that, he saw an opportunity. He saw a guy. I don't know how he got into CODB in prison, but
Mhm.
he came to ODB at his lowest point and said, "Hey, man, look, I have a business opportunity that'll help you out. You know, you're in jail. You're not earning money. You got all these kids. You know, here's a deal on the table for some money. You know," and that's what he presented to ODB, and he got into his trial. I mean, he worked with Miss Jones, Miss Cherry Jones, ODB's
Mhm.
mom. That's probably how he got in close. But and that's what happened. You know, I mean, Jared would have been instrumental in telling us about the second half of ODB's life. You know,
Mhm.
he would have his own unique perspective about the descent. You know, obviously there's some issues that he has with the estate and with the family. I won't go into that. He's relayed that to me multiple times. But we offered him the opportunity to tell that story on camera, and he declined. You know,
Mhm.
I'm sure. I'm surprised he hasn't said anything yet, but I'm sure he has some other things to say.
What like because he sort of like you never sort of explain where he goes or how he disappears. Are you able to say that or that
He
off the
hasn't. I can say. I mean, you can just Google him. He hasn't disappeared.
oh
He hasn't disappeared. I mean, he just released an audio book with ODB's mom that
hmm,
tells
Oh.
stories about ODB. He doesn't. He's still with Miss Jones.
all
He's
right,
still around. I mean, you know, like I said, Google Jared ODB New York Post, and you can see what he's been up to.
okay. No, I would love to know because you're both amazing interviewers. So, how do you like to approach your interviews to get the subjects to open up more and get comfortable?
I've been doing the interviews a long, long time, man, over 30 years. So, initially I would do my research with an AP, come up with a list of questions. I would always do a pre-interview. And sometimes in those pre-interviews, looking back, I would ask the questions I was going to ask on camera. So what happened was when I would get on camera, when I would get the subject on camera and ask those questions, then when they would deliver the answers that I'd already heard, they didn't seem to have any kind of spontaneity because they were already kind of canned. So in the ensuing years, I still do the research. I still come up with questions, but I don't sit with the sheeters like I used to, unless it's somebody I don't really know, and
Mhm.
ask the questions the way they're written on the page. I try to sort of be a little more spontaneous. And one of the things that I've learned in interviewing over the years, it's when someone gives you an answer that spurs in your head another question that you hadn't put on paper, that you said, "Oh, what about that? What did you know?" Then it brings about another question, which I like to do. I love to do. And then I try to be more conversational, just not just a question answer. And if you watch Jason's interviews, which I did watching this, because Jason does the same thing. I mean, but here's the thing to remember, for both of us, we've been editing for years. So we
Mhm.
listen to a lot of people ask questions. and
Mhm.
and listening to other people ask questions, you start to say, "Oh, I see why that person didn't open up. Oh, I see why I have to do," so you learn from when you edit this stuff.
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah,
You know,
James.
yeah, no, my dad summed it up perfectly. You know, I always just like to do research and just at the very least have a blueprint or a game plan of how to attack the interview. But as he said, then you just get in there and it's really a feeling sort of thing. You know, I'm in a break from a class right now at NYU, and we were just talking about that same exact thing, where you just want to give your subject a heads up, like, hey, this is what we'll be talking about, but it's giving them the questions the best thing to do. And then most of the time it's not. You just want to kind of get in there and be have that spontaneity. Sometimes like Mariah Carey, you have to give them the interview questions beforehand.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there's no way around it. But that still was a fantastic interview. So
I was gonna say she seemed well. I mean, she's probably seasoned in being interviewed, so seemed very comfortable
yeah,
and
she was
and open.
she was a pro. She was a pro, and she really cared about Old Dirty Bastard. She cared about the person. She had the foresight to know that the song Fantasy, the remix, would be a hit with their two voices together. She talked to the family afterwards. She was fantastic.
Well, I loved how you guys in the cutting room basically you set her up with that element, and then you set her up seeing him later to sort of show that arc of his change and how he's you know sort of not fallen but is struggling.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great because she was so close to him, that she could see and she could, confirm what everybody else was saying, is that once he left prison, something had left his eyes. That spark,
Mm.
that uniqueness that made him ODB, it had left, and unfortunately, because of the prison industrial complex and the forced, you know, hallucinogenic drugs that were forced on him, it took a piece of his soul away, which is heartbreaking to see. But I definitely wanted to make that point. We definitely wanted to make that point.
Mhm.
Like this was forced. He was forced to, I mean, he made his own mistakes, he did his own things, but the punishment was harsh.
Yeah. Now, you talked about getting that in. Is there a moment or a particular element in the story that you wanted to put into the film but weren't able to because you just ran out of time or didn't fit?
I wanted some more musical stuff, some more Wu-Tang inside stories that we weren't able to get. That would have been nice. That was really about it.
Now, how much footage, like when you get into the cutting room, how much footage do you guys have? Like how many hours?
It was at least over, what, 100 hours there, something like that. It was a
Yeah,
lot.
probably over 100 hours.
Yeah, it's
And
like
how many interviews did you do, Jace? 12?
12, 15 interviews. Yeah. Then we have, the family archival. Then we had other archival we brought in, third party archival. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's always always a lot of nowadays. It's so much it doesn't even faze me anymore because people just shoot and shoot and shoot.
How did you guys get that footage down into this? Like what are your approaches to, you got this massive amount of footage?
That's when it goes back to the process, man. It goes back to, all right, and we didn't do a paper cut for this. I just did a really loose, 3-act structure. But we knew in the 3-act structure, and we told it chronologically which points you want to hit in the story. So we're telling a story about, growing up in Brooklyn. Then I know I wanted the churn to happen here when they leave the housing projects and move to a different place, marriage, Wu-Tang. You just know the points you want to hit. And obviously, as you're putting it together, you're making your assembly, it's super, super, super long. But as an editor, when I put my editing hat on or my editing hat is on, I just want to see it down on that timeline from beginning to end. I always do. It makes me feel better. At least it's something. If the
Yeah.
timeline is empty or not complete, I start freaking out. But if I have something from the very beginning to the end, I feel great. It's terrible. It doesn't work, but at least it's
But
something
you got a chronology. Yeah.
you have a chronology and you're able to, like the same thing I did with the Louis Armstrong film. It was like 5-6 hours, but it was his whole life. Okay,
Yeah.
now back and rework it.
Yeah. That's right.
Now, I in an interview, Young Dirty Bastard said that he found it when he watched the film for the first time incredibly emotional. Um, what was it like working with him as an executive producer and, I guess helping him through those emotions because he's watching his dad, um, in good and bad.
I mean, he was cool. I mean, he gave a little bit of feedback, but not much to be honest with you, which, I prefer. Just, come in, give me a couple notes and then
Leave.
but
Go. I had this conversation with somebody yesterday, Gordon, and they were asking me, you know, how do you like to work? I was talking to this young filmmaker from London, a black filmmaker from London. He was saying, well, how do you feel when if you're not in the room with the editor all the time? I said, man, as an editor, I never want the director to be sitting behind me, man. And I would appreciate when I'm directing, I don't sit behind an editor. Because if I have to sit behind an editor, then I should be cutting it myself.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. And Jason's right. I mean, it's part of this creative process Jason's talking about. If you got a great team of people, you trust their instincts to help you in terms of your vision and telling the story. And Jason did. He had a good team. He had a good team of people.
yeah, no, it was a fantastic team. And then people just weigh in, and then everybody weighed in from the EP and producer side. And then it's our job to try to take all those notes and synthesize them into the best, film possible.
Yeah.
The emotional part that you're talking about, Gordon, it's funny. I didn't even realize how emotional it would be for the family. It's just,
Mhm.
you're in the middle of filmmaking, you're in the heat of battle, you're trying to manage all these different elements. And the one thing I forgot was how they going to take this. So we're there at the American Black Film Festival, and it's the first time they've seen the film on the big screen. And when it gets to the end, when Dirty dies, it just hit me like, holy shit, they've never really seen this on the big screen. And his oldest daughter starts crying in the middle of the screening. I hear her crying, and now I'm emotionally affected. You know, YDB, when he's a very, extroverted guy, but that night he was quiet and his eyes were red, and there's nothing you can really say to him. It's just like, hey, man, thank you for contributing and thank you for helping with the project. And he's been fantastic.
And
Well-
recently, Gordon, we screened it at the Grammy Museum.
Yeah.
And RZA was there, and he was supposed to be up on a panel with Jason and Isoline and Barsun and the two other producers, Messiah and Nicole, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And he couldn't come up. I mean, he basically said, he was so moved, he just was emotional, he couldn't come up. I mean, that shows the impact that the film has.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. He gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now.
Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
Well, that scene in particular, where with the mother and daughter and the body, and it was gut wrenching.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's what I call Jason's, what would I say?
I know what you're saying. That's the co-editor, Sam. That's one of the first scenes she cut. Samantha.
Yeah, that's a powerful scene.
That's one of the first scenes she cut, because that was the older footage, and she put that together. I said, yeah, we got it on that one. She got it. That was her.
Yeah, I knocked out of the park on that one.
Out the park on that scene.
Now, was there, because Jason, you were a fan of Wu-Tang. Is there something about Old Dirty Bastard that you didn't know that surprised you?
Musically, no. I knew most of it. I didn't know, and I wish I explored this more, his earlier rap persona, the rap professor stuff. I didn't know. I kind of knew, but I didn't know he was called the rap professor, which is funny to me. I wish I could somehow access those older rhymes.
Yeah.
All the stuff outside of the music, I wasn't aware of. All the family drama. I mean, you heard bits and pieces. You knew of the really sensational stuff, but all the stuff off stage, I didn't know. That was all a discovery process about who this guy was off stage. I saw somebody react in an interview, after watching the film. They were saying, most people don't even realize he's from Brooklyn, not Staten Island, like the rest of the clan.
Yeah.
You know that either. How he grew up, where he lived. He came from a 2-parent household. His household was a sanctuary for his cousins, Jizza and Reza. I knew none of that stuff.
Yeah.
That was all really fascinating, helped in helping build his character and who he was.
Now, I have one last question for both of you. It's just a fun way to wrap up the interview. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
I watched a stupid movie last night called The Hunt.
Oh, which
You don't know it. It's just
is it the one where the with the rich people hunt the other?
Yeah, Hillary Swank.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, I think
terrible.
That film. That's a fun movie.
It's fun, but it's terrible.
It's terrible, but it's fun. Yeah. The woman.
It's a good B movie.
Oh yeah, it's a B movie. Yeah, Hillary Swank at the end, and they got the wrong person. Yeah.
That's a terrible film, but it was like a guilty pleasure, man. I was
Yeah.
watching it last night, so it was fun, man. But I got so many, man.
How
I
about
mean,
you, Jason?
Guilty pleasure for me, like around that, there's a film called, somebody brought it up, and I love this movie. What's it called? Shooter with Mark Wahlberg.
I
Oh
like that
yeah,
movie.
yeah, yeah.
It's terrible. It's fun.
Every time it comes on TV, I'm watching it. I know the dialogue by heart. Yeah, Mark Wahlberg, Danny Glover, and Ned Beatty. Oh yeah.
Yeah, at the end when they're in the house.
In the house, he's shooting them up.
That's Antoine Fuqua.
Did he do? Oh, I didn't know he did.
Antoine directed that film. Yeah,
Action's pretty good.
yeah. Well, Antoine. I was rewatching his Magnificent 70 of the night.
Okay,
It's fun, but it's not a good movie.
That's just bad.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today, guys.
Our
Thank you.
pleasure, Gordon.
All right. And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com and, of course, on Instagram at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.